ipcc.us/download. Mohon Bapak Ibu menonaktifkan mic atau mengklik tombol mute apabila tidak sedang berbicara. To help today's meeting run smoothly, please mute when you're not speaking. Jika Bapak Ibu ingin mendengarkan terjemahan dalam bahasa Indonesia, klik Interpretation, pilih Indonesian. Anda tidak perlu pindah channel saat berbicara. Jangan khawatir, pembicara dan interpreter dapat mendengar Anda. If you'd like to listen in English, click Interpretation, then choose English. You don't need to change channel when speaking. Don't worry, the resource person and the interpreter will be able to hear your voice. Untuk pengguna Zoom Mobile, klik More untuk masuk ke pilihan berikutnya. Pilih Language Interpretation. Lalu pilih Indonesian untuk bahasa Indonesia. For Zoom mobile users, click More to go to the next choice. Then, choose Language Interpretation. Then, choose English for English. Mohon dipastikan bahwa Bapak Ibu sudah memilih salah satu bahasa yang akan digunakan. Karena jika Bapak dan Ibu tidak memilih, suara Bapak dan Ibu akan mengganggu pembicara dan proses penerjemahan. Terima kasih atas perhatian dan kerjasamanya. Please make sure that you have selected the correct language for not making any noises for both speakers and interpreters. Thank you for your attention and cooperation. Jika ada kendala mengenai fitur ini, silakan hubungi host yang sedang bertugas atau hubungi IT support. If you have any technical problems regarding this feature, feel free to chat the host on duty. Thank you.
Okay, good day, everyone. My name is Nana. I will be acting as the MC for the discussion today. Right now, you are joining the workshop class of Data Journalism on Regional Environment and Climate Crisis Stories. This session is a part of the Journalism Conference on Reporting Human Rights and Climate Crisis in Southeast Asia. This event is a partnership of the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, or the RWI, along with Indonesian Association for Media Development, or PPMN, and Internews Earth Journalism Network. This is the second day of the conference, and I do hope that we get to learn more and still have the same excitement and good spirit just like yesterday. And also please note that this meeting, we have interpretation feature for Bahasa Indonesia, which has just been explained in the video. And also we have a live stream on YouTube going on right now, so you can go to YouTube and search PPMN. And now, before we begin our session, I would like to introduce Muhammad Kholikul Alam, or Aal as we call him, as the moderator of the session. So Aal graduated from Pajajaran University, majored in journalistic. He used to work as a reporter for Pikiran Rakyat and Seputar Indonesia. And he was a researcher for Lembaga Studi Pers and Pembangunan, and currently as managing director of Jaring.id. To Kholikul Alam, welcome and good luck.
Okay. Thank you, Nana. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining Journalism Conference on Reporting Human Rights and Climate Crisis in Southeast Asia Day 2. Now, in this session, we have team of 3 from the Straits Times Singapore, who will kindly share their knowledge on data journalism practices within climate crisis and human rights issue. But before that, let me introduce the 3 of them. Our first speaker is Rebecca Pazos. Rebecca, can you say hi to the participant?
Hello, everyone.
That's her. She has been working at the Straits Times Singapore since 2015. With her expertise on storytelling, data analysis, and visualization, she won several prestigious awards, including SND Best of Digital Design and one IFRA ASEAN Digital Media Awards. Rebecca completed her master degree on visual tools from University of Girona, Spain. And our second speaker is Stephanie Adeline. She graduated from the University of Texas at Austin before joining the Straits Times. Stephanie finished her internship at National Public Radio as a news app designer. You can find most of her project at stephanieadeline.com. Stephanie, can you say hi?
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. I'm based in Jakarta as well.
Yeah, Stephanie worked for Straits Times, but she's now based in Jakarta. Last but not least is Charlene Chua, who graduated from Nanyang Technological University, majoring communication studies. Before joining the Straits Times on February this year, she works for CNBC as a social media producer. Charlene, can you say hi?
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm the latest addition to the team. So I've been learning a lot from Steph and Rebecca as well. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. During their presentation, please don't be hesitate to drop your question on Q&A box below. They are more than happy to answer your question. Okay, Tim, room is yours.
Okay, that's my cue. Good morning, everyone. I'm in Australia at the moment, so it's the afternoon, but I'm really excited for today. While I share my screen, do let us know at any point if something doesn't make sense or you have any questions. I think a lot of us are looking at the chat, so we can just stop at any time and go over any questions you have. So let's get into it. Super excited to talk about some of our climate graphics that we've done in the past year. I'm more looking forward to the latter half of our conversation today because I'm keen to get your feedback, your comments about some of the, I guess, good projects or things that we've really liked around that have sort of been done. And yeah, looking forward to that a little bit later on. So welcome. This is us. I do want to explain a little bit about my background as well, because you might be wondering why a white Australian woman is talking to you about Singapore. So I moved to Singapore 8 years ago and have been working for the Straits Times since 2015, as was introduced. And yeah, I've just kind of seen the team grow. Stephanie joined us a couple of years ago and Charlene just recently. And it's really great because our team are kind of all over the place. We were just commenting that we haven't actually met each other in person yet. I think maybe I passed Charlene during a vaccine thing back then, but yeah, we kind of have been operating this way. And I think it's a credit to the industry that we're in, that we're able to do a lot of our stuff online, and it's sort of open source. And I want to kind of share that with all of you today, that these are things that are accessible tools for you to use as well. So this is how you can contact us as well. Feel free to drop us an email. Now, I did send a document around to some of the participants earlier. I think it might be in the chat again. So these are 3 graphics that we sort of want you to have a look at, be familiar with, and then we'll be asking some questions or polling you in live to kind of get your feedback about the design choices that these organizations have made. So there are little things, they're very subtle, but I think it's what makes a project really stand out. It makes us become able to interpret things a little bit easier. So it's beyond just the text or the framing of it. Sometimes it's the color choices, sometimes it's the animation choices, or sometimes it's even the way that they've constructed the story, what they've chosen to put first, second, and third. So we just kind of be looking through these three later on. You can access these links, I hope, are gifted article links. So you should be able to access them outside of the paywall. But anyway, I will show you them as a screen grab video if you haven't actually seen the projects as well. So, okay. What exactly do we do at the Straits Times? So this is a quote from this book by Donna Saunders, and she says that the mind and I demand stimulation and surprise. So I really like this. This is something I learned in my master's program. And I think it's because we still need the familiar, like we still need the things that we are, you know, we trust, we're comfortable with. This is what the Straits Times looks like in print and online. I think this is a very familiar format for readers, but we add a little bit of spice. If anyone is on TikTok, that is a TikTok reference, which I love. I like to describe our team as sort of adding something new or different to familiar formats to excite and entertain, to keep us, you know, interested in the content that we're being presented as well. So for words, we might add things like charts as a basic level. To charts, we add stuff like scrolly telling, which is this kind of format here. If you haven't heard the term scrolly telling, it's basically this kind of thing you see with a little bit of text, and there's either images behind it or a chart that we're explaining that may have a little bit more complexity behind it. So it's a form of storytelling in a scrolly format, which is great for mobile devices, essentially. That's why it came about. Then for images, we can add 3D, we can do AR, augmented reality. So it's really just pushing beyond the boundaries that we have, always trying to stay at the very latest of technology. I think even right now we are trying to do something in the metaverse. So we shall see how that pans out. There are definitely formats that become familiar, that become something that we do regularly, and we enhance those, we get better at those. But I think it's also really nice as a team that we can be creative and just always try something new. But that does require a lot of support in the newsroom that I understand perhaps a lot of you may not necessarily have. So I will go over the kind of pros and cons about that as well. Maybe this may be something you already know, but I think we went over this again in my master's program, and I think it's good to kind of think about why we should do them. I think in this day and age with fake news as well, data can help contribute to a story's accuracy, its originality and reliability. This is from a study done in 2011, so a long time ago. I think it's still relevant now. It also provides like a factual basis for analysis, you know. So this is a good thing, I think, in this age of fake news. This was done in 2010, so it's still applying today. We still, I think data, even more so now, has become necessary to take a stab at bringing back the trust in the news as well. But we have to do this carefully. Also, data stories, they can be serious, they can be, but they can also be very pretty and they can also be funny too. So we can't forget that element of it, because data can be very cold, can be very far removed from the human side of things. We do need to somewhat bring that back with a bit of humor, with a bit of beauty. We can actually achieve that as well, which is the part that I like the most anyway. Okay, what skills are needed? So this is what I was kind of talking about in terms of being always at the latest of technology, and having the support of the team around you as well. So I believe that it kind of falls into these three buckets of skills. So you have design, code, and then data journalism or statistics or whatever you want to call it. These are very fluid buckets, but essentially, when we join all those three together, this is where the good stories are at. And the reason, so I kind of describe it as, and I think Steph and Charlene in there, I've repeated this many times. It's not necessarily about you needing to know all three, because I think it's near impossible. There are some unicorns out there. There are some people that can do all three, and that's amazing. But as a team, so we have developers, we have designers, we have data journalists on the team. And I think when we're communicating together, it helps us to understand where the others are coming from. So we really try to do a little bit of code, at least all of us, understand design principles, understand the storytelling or the journalism aspect. And we all sort of sit in our own buckets, but we are able to communicate better. And I think that creates for a better, more fluid project at the end of the day. Okay, so now that you know what we do, we're going to take you through 3 climate graphics that we've done this year. I'm going to pass you over to Charlene now, who will take us through the IPCC climate report that we did. Yes?
Yes. Yeah, so okay, the first climate change piece we did this year was the one on the IPCC report, which came out in August. So for this one, it's quite different from the rest of the other pieces that Rebecca and Steph will go through later on, because we had a much shorter, we had a quicker turnaround time. So I think for this piece, we only had 1 week to do it and to like create the charts, to dress the story up, and yeah. So it's quite different from what we usually, from what we are used usually used to. But in the end, we managed to do it within 1 week, and I think we still did a pretty decent piece, which managed to stick with our audience in Singapore. And yeah, so the piece is actually structured something like a listicle but we inserted like amazing charts, like what Rebecca says, like insert a little bit of spice in our articles. So that's what we did. And yeah, so when the IPCC report came out, it was huge for the database community because it really had simple charts that were easy to understand, and this was helpful because we were able to recreate them easily for Straits Times, and in fact there were other news organizations that recreated the chart as well. So on Twitter it was huge. There were a lot of talks on it, and people were just like recreating the charts themselves. So if you look at there were a lot more data. There was even an interactive atlas where you can just, like, if you look at the bottom left corner, there's this like chart which actually we used in our piece as well. But yeah, so all these data were available, which was great because it meant that there were a lot of things that we could do for our article. Yep, I think we can do next slide. So that's what we did. We recreated charts. So if you look at the left, this one is from the left side, shows screenshots from the IPCC report, and the right side are screenshots of what we actually did. So the first thing we knew that we had to do was to rename the categories, because it was not reader friendly, whatever there was in the report, like SSP 1 to 1.9, all these 5 scenarios. We knew that it would not stick with the audience for the layman in general. So the first thing we knew we needed to do was to rename them, and so that's what we did, like highest, high, middle, low, lowest. And also we needed to, when we created the charts, we were very intentional in making sure that these charts were highlighting the point that we want to highlight. So for example, in this piece, one of the few main points that we wanted to highlight was that global sea mean level change will rise, but it's just that the pace at which it will rise and the number of extreme sea level events will become more likely. And so that's why we annotated it at the top as well to highlight that point. And on the bottom left, there's another chart that we repurposed. So the left side was a bit more complex. This one was from the IPCC report. And you can see that it's actually two charts. So both charts are kind of interlinked together, but it wouldn't have been able, it wasn't easily understandable for us. So we basically we basically just recreated it, but we only chose to leave the bottom one inside because that would make more sense to our readers. And we also highlighted the main point of the data that was given. So when we saw the data, the thing that stood out the most was that even in the lowest scenario, the median temperature increase already surpassed the carbon budget of 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was the budget that is set back in the previous conference. So that was the main point of the chart, is that the IPCC report, the results shows that this is bad. And even the lowest case scenario shows that we are not doing great. It really is a code red for humanity. Yeah, I think we can move to the next slide. And then we add a little spice. So bar charts are great, but obviously we want to spice things up a little bit. We like to do that. And we also try to create charts that are striking and that will hook our audience easily. So climate change in general it is a topic that's not for everyone. It is quite hard to understand. And yeah, it is a topic that's quite hard to understand unless you are really into it. So one way we wanted to hook our audience was to use, so we created this chart which grouped according to like generations. So it's like boomers, Gen Z, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and then 8 years and older. And we did this because we wanted to make like a personal connection to our audience. We felt that in general, people, at least in Singapore, there is, and I think everywhere else, people kind of identify with the generation that they are born in. So obviously, just one look at this chart, it shows that younger generations will be hardest hit by global warming, which is, that's why we need to do something about it, right? That's why the younger generations are like so they're angry because whatever decisions that are made now will impact them in the future, but not so much of the older generation. So, and this chart alone highlights that really well, because you're right, one look you can see the difference. And we also localized the data using Southeast Asia data because we wanted to make it personalized for our audience. So if you look at the top, it's like 1 plus 1.4 plus 2.1 and 4 and plus 4 degrees. All this data is based on Southeast Asia data. Yeah. And yeah, it's based on Southeast Asia data. Yeah. So the initial sketch to this piece is actually on the right, which is more like towards, we're talking about visual choices, right? So on the right is more like, we use more like pastel colors, and there was even we use blue, so we use from blue to red. And we showed this to our visual advisor, Zakin, and one thing he pointed out was that the blue doesn't feel like it's it's important and it's urgent, which actually 1 plus 1.4 degrees is a lot. And we wanted to hammer down that point. And that's why we switched it to make it all red. It's just that the color of the red intensifies. So I think it was a great learning experience for me when he said that, because I was like, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because when you put the two charts side by side together, you can easily see that the left one has much more impact. It makes you feel like this is something we should be caring about. Like there's a sense of urgency. So that's why color choices are really, really important as well in our charts. Yeah. Okay, the next slide. And the third thing we did was to localize it for Singapore audience, because we are the Straits Times, we are the national newspaper, and we wanted to focus on floods, because in Singapore, floods are something that has been happening really often recently, not so much in the past. So in the IPCC chart, there was data that said that yes, heavy rainfall events will get more frequent and more intense. So this is the chart we recreated. It will be more likely to happen, and also the intensity of the floods will increase. And I really, really wanted to use this image on the right as our header image, because I think the look of that woman is amazing. Like, she's so over it. And this is like, you can see, just one look at the photo, I think is great. You can see that, wow, the floods are actually happening in Singapore. So we wanted to use this flood data in our piece to make it relatable to the Singapore audience in a sense. But I think we move to the next slide. Yeah, but we also needed to make sure that the facts are like scientifically accurate. So we actually sent this to Audrey, our climate change correspondent, and she actually said that even though the data showed that, actually we can move to the previous slide, I'm sorry. Yeah, so she actually said that even though the data in the IPCC report showed that heavy rainfall events will get more frequent and more intense, we don't actually know whether the floods in Singapore are because of climate change. So it could be because of the drainage systems. In Singapore there has been a lot of like upgrading works going on, so it could be because of that. And there has not been enough like scientific research done in Southeast Asia for floods to say that it's for sure due to climate change that we are seeing more and more of these heavy rainfall events. So the one on the left is global data, and we couldn't say for sure that it was definitely happening for Southeast Asia. And so that's why we were very careful with our choice of words when we wrote in our article. We made sure to say that flood events could happen more often, and it could be a result of climate science. However, by climate change, however, there is not enough evidence, or like there is not enough like scientific research to show that. Yeah. Okay, next slide. So instead of back to this. So instead of focusing on floods, this was the final header image that we used, which is focusing on heat instead. But it wasn't as impactful, we felt, because in Singapore it's a tropical island, it's super hot. The heat is something that we've been facing for the longest time, and we are used to it. When there's heat, we just use more aircon. We just lower the temperature of the aircon. So, but I think the learning experience here is that as journalists, we really need to find a fine line between wanting to capture the attention of our audience, while at the same time making sure that we are like accurate with our reporting. Yeah, and I think we can pass my time to Rebecca.
Thanks, Charlene. Yeah, I think we'll be covering that a lot today, about this fine line between the science and the visual aesthetics of it. So now back to me. I'm going to be talking about a project we did, a little bit longer term project. It was part of my master's final piece, and then we redid it and published it for the Straits Times. It's called Slowing Down CO2. We were presented with carbon data from our world in data, and sort of wanted to look at the impact of carbon in the atmosphere. And so one thing for me that I didn't realize, like I knew carbon was bad, and like I knew it was like something to do with climate, but it wasn't like it didn't shock me for some reason until I saw a graph that like showed we were so close to hitting the carbon budget. And so we used this concept of like the budget as the entire screen. And then, of course, we're using that smoke effect. Usually, I think when you see carbon, it's usually like black smoke, smoggy stuff. And on my team, I had a science illustrator, and she was like, no, like if you saw carbon, if you could see it, it would be red because it traps heat. So immediately we were like, yes, scientifically accurate and brilliant, like visually a striking red smoke, like let's go for it. And that's sort of how this project came about. So of course we had a lot of discussions about making sure that this intro is as scientifically accurate as possible. So the smoke actually represents the variation in the data as well. So the length of the smoke is actually correspondent to the variation, which is kind of a fun scientific thing if people are interested in that. If you're not, you're still going to get a sense of urgency, I think, from this visual. So it starts off like where we were in the 1850s. Apologies. And then it fills up the entire screen. So imagining that the entire screen, so this is also fine on mobile. It's another concern of ours to make sure that on mobile it translates well. So your entire mobile screen will be filled up, almost all of it. Like it's like just this tiny little bit is sort of, we just don't want to get to that part of it. So I think, you know, for me, it was about this framing of it. It was about this saying like, not just focusing on how many billion tons of carbon are in the atmosphere, because I think for the everyday reader, they're not going to really grasp that. But if you put it into a percentage, like this is 100%, we don't want to get to this point, then you kind of see where we're at. And the worst thing that we kind of shocked me was that most of this has happened within our lifetime. So this is another aspect that we were able to highlight. You can put in your year of birth or whichever year of birth you like, and you can see how much of the carbon has in this time frame has been emitted during our lifetime. It's kind of shocking. So almost half of it has been emitted within the last 50 years. So I think this whole purpose of this is just to really like spark the everyday person's interest in sort of why there is such an urgent need to slow down carbon and even extract it from the atmosphere. Following on from that, we then have this kind of calculator. It's a simplified calculator. There was a lot of work behind it to just narrow it down to 9 choices across 3 categories. So the 3 categories being individual, government, and industry. And I wanted it to be all 3 because I feel like a lot of the conversation is around the individuals doing a lot of the work. And in fact, what we came to the conclusion with this calculator was that all of us, government, individual, industry, we're just so far gone that like we all have to do something. And so these choices have been specifically chosen to kind of highlight the fact that you can't actually get it down to 0 without selecting, I think, at least 4 or 5 choices across the category. So, you know, that's how we kind of ended it off. So you can see there, like, it needs to be like a couple of individual choices, a couple of like industry choices. I mean, this was a big concern for me as well, is that like, not everyone can make choices like going meat free or like sustainable fashion. That's not like, for most of the world, they're not in an economic position to do that. So where should we put the pressure on is like industry and government, really, that probably have the biggest gains to make in terms of extracting carbon or slowing it down. But it's not impossible. So this is the other idea, is that with the calculator, you know, you as the reader are actively being able to see how those choices impact it. And yeah, then we have a few charts at the end to kind of like summarize the historical aspect. We use a lot of data wrapper charts, so I'll include a link later on. This helps us, especially for non-coders or people that are not comfortable with D3, you can just quickly create these charts and embed them into your projects. And it's been created by people that used to work at the New York Times. So it's very good for news-based graphics. And also you can download them as a JPEG or as an SVG, and then you can manipulate them however you like. But anyway, I'll share that a bit later. Now, I want to see, can anyone drop in the chat the link to the REPL? So this is not a GitHub link, but if you want to follow along with the code now, you can also have access to this later. I'm just gonna jump out of the, I'm just gonna jump out of the presentation now. And I wanted to actually show you a little bit about how we built the carbon Scrolly, because it looks really intense, but it's actually like not that crazy. Like it's not that crazy what we did, because it's got the moving smoke and it's got like all this stuff going on. But in actual fact, so we use Vue.js, which is a JavaScript framework for building components, very similar to Svelte. I've chosen to build this one in Svelte for you today. So I think if I just jump back a minute, you should open up to a screen like this. You may need to create an account to log in, and then you can fork this REPL on your own. I chose to do it like this just because GitHub, you would have to clone it to your local computer, you'd have to run everything, and I don't think you can see it in action on the web. So this is just a way for you not having to have the environment downloaded on your computer. So you should just be able to, like, once you've logged in or you've forked the REPL, you can go into the workspace. I realized, I'm just looking at the time. Okay, I may take 5 minutes just to kind of show you the basics of this, and then you can kind of adapt it how you like. There is a little button up the top here that will say run. And this is how you can see the project loading up on a screen. So what I've done there is I've just opened it in a new tab to see the entire page. So all I've done is actually given you the beginning Scrolly part, because the calculator is something that there are components online you can probably play with, but the Scrolly, I just really wanted to show you how we sort of built that. Now, if you go, hopefully you can see my screen. I might just.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, good. So everything that you need to know is in the source folder, basically. And the app.svelte is the main coding like interface. So this is what's going to build out our HTML, our CSS, our JavaScript files out onto the web that we eventually push online. There is if you're not familiar with Svelte or Vue, basically within the same component. So this is a main component, you could say. It's going to load this whole thing, and this is where we put other components in. So it's like a template module thing. It's fantastic for Frankensteining stuff. So I call it Frankenstein, when you grab components from other projects and you slot them in. This is really great for reusable stuff, so we're not having to rebuild from scratch every single time. But this particular Scrolly, so it's a little bit more of its own monster, because it's based on a Scrolly, but it's actually using data to determine the width of the screen. Now, I hope you're still with me. It's basically just a CSS box, and we are moving the width of the screen based on a percentage from the data. That's it. And then on top of that, we've added a video, an autoplay video. So in theory, when we broke it down, it's not that complicated. Of course, when you actually go to code something, there are always problems. But here you go. Here you've got the scroller component, which is giving us the ability to build the scroll. And here we have the budget component, which is basically that CSS box that's moving the width of the container as we scroll down. So here you can see as well, within the same Svelte component, you can see your HTML. So if you wanted to change the title, you can. This is just basic HTML. And then here we've got the scroller component. And inside of that, we have the budget component. So where are these coming from? They're coming from this folder called components. The scroller is a standard component within Svelte, so that we haven't actually had to build ourselves. We're just using somebody else's component. The only thing we had to build ourselves was the budget component, which is the scaling part. So here it's actually building in, it's getting the year, the amount, because we actually use the carbon, the amount in the thing I'll show you here, at the top here as the annotation. And then the width, V, is just the percentage. Let me show you the data. So in our data, we have a carbon.json file. And here you've got the percentage, the year. So the first column is year, carbon dioxide is the next one, then percentage. And the percentage is what we're using for the width of the screen. That gets fed in to the app.svelte, I believe, or not. I've looked at this 1 million times and I forget every single time. I think it may be in the main.js. So if you're familiar with Svelte or Vue, you may understand this. This is just a different way to sort of input the data. But like if you wanted to bring your own data into this, you can. You just drop the file into here. JSON is recommended because it loads quicker and it just sort of, it knows what to do. You don't have to convert it to like CSV or any of these other things. I'm oversimplifying here, but better to kind of stick within the format that it is. And so it's importing this data file as the variable carbon. Okay. And that's basically it. So this is the div with the style, with the width, the percentage. And then here we have our crawling video, which is in the crawling.smoke video, which is somewhere in here. I believe I have it in public, yes. So that's that file there. We had to do like 2 or 3 different versions for mobile as well as desktop. So I've just given you the desktop one now. So feel free, that's sort of it. That's all I'll show you today, so we can move on. But you have access to that. You can fork it and you can play around with it as to your heart's content. Okay. Back to the if does anyone have any questions on that, or we just okay, we'll get that. Looks like a after the presentation question, so I'll come back to that one. Okay, you know, feel free to message us anytime, email, like we are happy to give you some recommendations. So now I'll pass you over to Steph, who will take you through the third project.
All right, so we earlier in November or October, we did a series actually. So we did 3 main projects on climate change leading up to COP26 to kind of like get people interested in climate change coverage. And I think one of the biggest issues relating or topic of concern regarding climate change in Southeast Asia is rising sea levels, especially in countries like Indonesia, Singapore, Philippines, Thailand, and all these Southeast Asian countries were so affected by rising sea levels in some way, shape, or form. And to a certain extent, we've already seen the impact even now and even from a few years back too. So we wanted to do something on rising sea levels. And this was supposed to be published in November, but now we're publishing it in January. So this is kind of a first look at the project because we haven't published it. So I can't share you the full link of the project yet, but I included in the slides a couple screenshots and screen recordings of this project. And I'm just going to walk you through the process of creating this project, which is, it actually took a really long time for this. We started doing like the data gathering part and everything. We started, I think it was early this year, like in March or April, and finally finished it in November. So it was quite a long time. So yeah, so as I said, in the sea level rise is an important topic, and in the latest IPCC report, it reflected that. Mainly, the report reiterated that sea level of 1 meter is likely to occur, especially if we don't do anything to reduce our emissions. Which the sea level rise of 1 meter is something that the scientific community has known for a while, and I think the latest report just confirmed that that was the case. The other important thing that we knew from the report was that, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so these are some screenshots from the IPCC report itself. And as you see, there's like a lot of very complicated sciencey stuff and graphics in the report. As Charlene mentioned before, there's the different scenarios and what and how many centimeters or meters of sea level rise that's contributing to. But the two other important things that was new in this report is that they had local projections. Previously, they only had global projections. Now they have, if you can see this in the right side, top right side, the graphic with the map, there is like little squares in here, and in this like website, you can click on the square and you can see the data for that particular tile. And so that's what we did. That's where we got the sea level projections for Singapore. So that's one thing, they have local projections. And the second thing is that they also had more information on ice sheets instability, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more later. But essentially, these are uncertain like processes that are observed in Antarctica or Greenland. And it's very uncertain, and we don't know if that's going to happen or not. But the idea is that we need to be aware of it now, because once it happens, it's going to wreak havoc all across the world, and it's going to be really, really bad, essentially. So yeah, so those are the three things that was important for us to visualize in this piece. So yeah, we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so our main visualization for this piece is actually this 3D simulation. So I'm pretty sure if you've visited Singapore, if you know anything about Singapore, the Merlion is a very famous landmark or icon, and we wanted to use that as a scale because a lot of people like they don't really know what 1 meter of sea level rise looks like, but when you put that in the scale of a Merlion, which is something that most Singaporeans know, or all Singaporeans know, I guess, and we visualized the best case scenario, worst case scenario, and also this low likelihood, high impact scenario, which relates to the ice sheets instability processes. And so yeah, we wanted to visualize the 3 different scenarios and use this scale of the Merlion, which I think definitely like relates it to the audience a lot more, because then you see a oh, like this is a famous icon. Like what if even like this famous thing about Singapore, like what if this is affected by climate change and by sea level rise? By this project is actually also inspired by an earlier work that our team did in a few years ago. It was also a 3D simulation, but it was like a virtual reality thing. And so we sort of like redid that and converted that into just online, and because that would allow us to do more explanation on like what the IPCC report is and all the caveats to the data, and a little bit more explanation on things like extreme sea level, and I'll talk about those a little bit more in the next slide. But we also, oh sorry, you can go back. So in this part of the visualization, we also wanted to show like what 5 meters of sea level rise looks like. And so if you increase the sea level in the Merlion area by 5 meters, you'll see that it's basically flooded. And so 5 meters is actually the maximum, okay, I don't know how to explain that better than saying maximum, but I think it's mostly, it's like if you take into account all of the worst possible things that could happen, like things like what if there's a heavy rain, and what if that coincides with high tide, and what if that coincides with a storm surge or other extreme weather events, like all of that could total up to 5 meters of sea level rise, which yes, we don't know if that might actually happen or not, but it's good to take into account that scenario, because like as Charlene mentioned in the IPCC report, it was mentioned about how extreme weather scenarios are going to be more likely in the future, and so it's something that we should still take into account of, even though it might or might not happen in the future. So we can go to the next slide now. And then we also added a few illustrations and animated graphics. These were pretty fun to do. And I think the way we did it, it makes it more accessible to the reader. Like people don't really understand how like maybe sometimes people don't understand like how things that are happening in Antarctica or in Greenland is going to affect, Singapore or Indonesia or Southeast Asia, that like the place that's so far away. But the thing is, like, actually the closer you are to the equator, the more affected you are by sea level rise, because water has gravitational pull and things like that. So we wanted to explain that through just very simple illustrations. And then on the left side, we also had this animated graphic on the ice sheet instability process, or the ice cliff instability process, I think it's what it's called. And to do this, we actually consulted with some researchers at the NTU Earth Observatory of Singapore, and they helped us with like understanding this processes, because it's like one of the big things that was mentioned in the IPCC report, but it's so hard to understand. Before like meeting with them, I watched like a number of YouTube videos trying to explain it, but I don't think anything explained it better than like actually talking to the expert. So that was extremely helpful. And I think in doing any kind of like data or visual reporting, consulting with experts is always like one of the most important things to do, because like things like climate science and things like sea level science, it's so evolving and it's always changing, and like there's a lot of caveats to the data too. Like these are all projections, right? These are not things that are observed, and these are things that might happen in the future, but we don't really know. And so to be able to understand that and to be able to communicate that in an accurate way, it's like you really have to understand the topic, and to understand the topic, you have to talk to someone, you have to ask them stupid questions, and there are no stupid questions. And you have to, you just have to like talk to someone who like devotes their life to this, essentially. Okay, so we can go to the next slide. And the last part of the piece is this map that we did. It's a 3D map, but it's essentially highlighting the different coastal protection measures, or the different like solutions that Singapore has in place for protecting against rising sea levels. So things like mangroves, like planting mangroves, conserving mangroves. There's also other things like seawall and yeah, now I can't remember, but there's a lot of different solutions that are already in place, and also a lot of solutions that are planned in the future. And I think something that's very important for us in this part particularly is to show that whatever solution you want to like implement, it needs to be based on science. There needs to be sort of a collaboration between governments and institutions and research institutions. And also that's the first part. And the second part is whatever solution you want, it has to go hand in hand with reducing carbon emissions, with limiting global warming, because without those measures, you know, like we're not going to be able to keep up with the rates of change. Like if we built seawall and we don't like reduce the carbon, and sea levels are going to keep rising, and we're just going to have to keep on adapting and adapting. So there needs to be both of those things. Let's see, is there anything else I'd like to add about this part? Yeah, but just to summarize, I think with this piece, our goal is to strike a balance between like, hey, this is a terrible thing that might happen if we don't do anything about it, but also on the other hand, hey, like things are happening and the government's doing something, and also there are things that we can do to still prevent that from happening in the future, so that it doesn't turn out so bad. Yeah, and I think that's really the goal of this piece. It's to show urgency, but also it's not too late to do something about it.
Okay, thank you, Steph. Yeah, so we haven't published that one yet, just to reiterate. We will be publishing it next year. So we just wanted to give you a little preview. So the next part, now we're like at the end of the sort of what we wanted to discuss, and now it's all about sort of thinking about provoking some conversation, and throwing in some tips that I think we have helped us anyway in creating data-driven stories, but using it, like basing it on other stuff that we've sort of liked, that we've seen done by other news organizations. Sorry, my computer. Okay, so there's 3 tips that we'll go through today. The first one is do try to help the audience by giving context or frames for understanding. So that's like kind of like the Carbon Project, I feel was at my best version of trying to achieve that. This one was done by the Washington Post, and I really liked it because it starts off with this school. Now it's not climate related, it kind of is because it's fires, but it starts off with this school. You don't actually see any human faces yet in this piece until much later on, but it has the school and then it zooms out with this drone footage, and then it goes into the real sciencey aspect. So it's really like hooked me from the beginning in terms of like going, okay, this is an entire school that no one has anymore. And then it goes straight into like the context of it, like looking at the reason of why this happened, and it's all very sciencey. Even the transition from like satellite image to more data map based one, it seems like a conscious choice. Next is a piece that another colleague of ours did on the mask and the disposable masks that have been thrown away during the pandemic. So this is Reuters has done a few like this, sort of looking at the sheer amount. So this is where Scrolly can really come into play. There are some small little animations and things to kind of help keep people engaged all the way through the piece. And now this one is one of our question times. So let's see how the question time goes. This one is done by the New York Times. Yes, we needed to do the New York Times. They are the standouts in data visualization. I love this piece as a data investigative piece because it looks at a very contentious issue in the US, which is race, and how that implicates how they're affected by climate change, right? So that being in Black neighborhoods means that they're more impacted by climate change just for the way that the neighborhoods are constructed because of these very old racist policies. So hopefully you've seen it, and hopefully you can go to the quiz now. I'll let you take some time. There is a QR code, and I don't know if anyone is able to start. So this is the question. Are residents in the red line district mostly white, mostly Black, or mostly mixed? I don't know if my teammates can help me if there are any answers yet, because I've never used this Slido in the slides before. I think I can switch to the next slide and we can see the answer. Do you guys know if anyone's been able to respond yet?
I think we have two responses, but I think we need
Okay,
more.
okay. We'll just wait. I don't want to flip to the next screen and then we don't have anything. Yeah, so I mean, the reason for this is just to kind of, I think it's one aspect that I realized when I was judging for S&D Best of Digital Design is that like the best projects, they pick something, just one thing, and they really narrow down on that one thing. And it's the hardest thing to do, of course, is what we do, editing. But I think when it comes to like data journalism, a lot of it is our own work. A lot of it is our own analysis, our own effort that we've gone out, we've gathered the data, and then to kind of discard or throw away like 80% of it. And then we have to like only include this one angle, this one thing that we want to get across. But it's really important to do so just for the audience's sake. So they're like, all of your design choices will come. Yes, we have answers.
Maybe you can go back to the slide with red lines so people can see
That's
it.
all right. That's all right. I actually have, that's fine. We're doing a live quiz. So yes, a lot of people have answered. I'm good. Yes, of course, it's mostly Black. And so this is like what I wanted to sort of highlight is that they have really narrowed down on that aspect, and it's not anywhere in the text. It's not in the title. It's not, is racism. Of course, racism in the US you probably associate with mostly Black issues, but there are like other races as well that are affected. So again, this is something I wanted you to notice. The animation of the lines is a really cute technique in sort of making it look arbitrary. It just looks like they just drew a line and they just blocked off these particular areas. And then they've overlaid that with the heat implications. The white, wealthier neighborhoods are more greener, have more greenery. They're like less cemented, less pavement. And so that to me kind of highlights the fact that it was just some old white men somewhere just decided to draw a red line, and just basically block off this area from any further improvements. Okay. Next, second tip is to use illustrations, animations, or human stories to help make it more relatable. And these are just some examples. This one won a lot of awards last year because it did a really good job, I think, of these very cutesy animations. It's called Your Climate Future. So basically anywhere in, I think it's Norway, you can put in your address or your sort of neighborhood, and it gives you this customized story of like what's going to happen to your neighborhood. And these little animations are just really engaging and very cute. And I do know it took them quite a lot of work. So I guarantee this is very aspirational. But I think the inclusion of like little things like this help, especially for very scientific topics. This is another one that the New York Times did called Bad Future, Better Future. So it basically takes you almost like a children's storybook, like through what could be the possible worst future if we do nothing about climate change, and then it brings you back towards what could be a better future. So it's giving you sort of two alternatives. And I think like even the placement of the text and everything, the way that they've kind of gone bad future, and like you all of a sudden now you're scrolling down. And then when you come into the better future, you're also like moving across. So these little things they all add up to what makes these projects really good. So this is second question time. This is a piece by Continentalist. If you haven't heard of them, they are a really great little group of data visualizers out of Singapore, basing a lot of their content around Southeast Asia. So this is a climate piece that they did looking at heat over different lifetimes in different countries. So you can see there's Indonesia as well, and Thailand, Philippines. And so second question is, which country's Gen Z population experiences the most high temperatures, which is more yellows or reds? So if it's green, then they're less than average. If it's yellow and red, it's higher than average on those little bars. Yes. We shall see. Do we have? Oh, okay, I can see up the top here. If you can. Okay, we have one. When we get to about 5 results, I will change it.
We have
Yeah,
7 answers. The
Okay,
link is in the
good.
chat, by the way, for anyone who's interested in checking out the articles.
Yes, thank you so much, Charlene. Yay, okay. Oh, okay. We have a tie almost, Indonesia and Singapore. Yeah, okay, this might be a little harder to see because of the way it's been constructed, but we really wanted to show you this one because I think its format is a little bit more accessible for those that don't have like full-on developers or a developer framework in their newsrooms. So yes, it is actually Singapore that has the more yellows and reds. So that's the sort of choice that they made in terms of using those colorings across all of the different countries as well. So it's not too involved in terms of coding. I think it's just an image. So something that's a bit more accessible for you. They have shared this link about how to build your own Scrolly telling. If you're ever curious about how to do that, it's a great little guide. And then here, hoping that my colleagues can help share these as well. So very quickly, datarapper.de is a free service. We as an organization use the paid one so that we have access to our own fonts, colors, and styles. But I think you can use the free version. We also sometimes use it directly as an embed. Because it has mobile to desktop responsiveness, but also you can download it as an SVG. So SVG allows us to manipulate it a little bit more, maybe change the colors or the fonts or whatever, but you've still got like everything sort of there, and then you can use that on your websites as well. AI to HTML is great. This is literally what we use. We also use ArchieML, which I have forgotten to include here. Flourish is great, but I would recommend using it as an exploratory tool, similar to Tableau. And then for the actual final version, Flourish allows you to download SVG, and then you can refine your annotations, your structure around the chart as well. And there is also here a link to the Pudding, which is a data organization in the US. They've built on GitHub a Svelte starter kit for data stories as well. So welcome to give it a try. I think this is what's great about what we do is it's all online and you can tinker away. There's plenty of support. Mostly you can email us anytime. We are happy to help. And finally, this is something that I really learned in my master's, And I think it's an aspect that sometimes we forget after we have done all the serious data reporting and finding our data angle and checking everything, is that we have to remember to pick a strong visual metaphor for the memorability factor. So beyond just having everything accurate and ethically above board, we need to do something that's visually striking and memorable. And this is where the fun stuff happens for me, right? So this is a project that the New York Times did that won like gold awards like everywhere in all design things. And I think it's because it has this very human element to it, but it's a strong data story as well. So they went and they analyzed these 2 kids in Delhi, which ones were more exposed to air pollution based on their socioeconomic background. Something that, you know, I think applies to a lot of countries, especially in Asia as well. So this one, if this is gonna work. Okay, last quiz time. Where are time? Okay. So where was the pollution exposure gap the largest between Monu and Amia? At home or at school? And I don't quite know why this is not playing, but I do hope you're able to see that one. It's okay. I will explain it once we've got the answers. Oh, okay. Okay, interesting. This may be because I wasn't able to show you the actual piece, but the correct answer is at home. And apologies. Yes, the correct answer is at home. So what actually happened was at school, they were sort of more equally positioned because of the pollution. So where he lives, Monu, where he lives in Delhi, it's in a very poor area and there's smog and pollution everywhere, whereas Amia sort of lives inside as well and she's more protected at home. And this was a key focus of the piece. So I spoke to some of the New York Times people that worked on this project, and that was their exact goal. So when I talk about narrowing down the angle, that was their angle, was to show the difference that it was at home and at school, that there was this difference. So like outside of their homes, they were generally fine, but it was while they were at home, that was their worst exposure and the differences between them. So if you can see, they're using these little bar charts on top of the little GIFs as well, as the smooth transition of the lines and the color. So the yellow and the orange, very consistent use of these encoding mechanisms. And that is it. So hopefully we have enough time for questions. Yes, you can contact us anytime. So yes, that's it from us.
Thanks, Rebecca, Charlene, and Stephanie. Seeing visualization project presentation, especially on how to make it more familiar with our audience, is always fascinating. And I'm pretty sure that the participant will agree on that, as I see a lot of praising words on the chat box. We have around 20 minutes left for the Q&A session. Do any participant? Yeah, I see a lot of questions, but let me resume it. First, you do a complex test with fascinating visualization quickly. Do you have a secret recipe how to do that you can share with us? And
Okay. A secret recipe.
Yes.
You know what? It's literally what we're doing now. So like this is why we built the quiz the way we did it. So it was about looking at what others have done, but looking at it with a very critical lens. So instead of just going, oh, okay, yeah, I like that, and moving on, because I think what happens with data projects for a lot of the audience is that we're presenting it with data. So they read it, they consume it, they understand it, and then they move on. And they're not really understanding why it is that they're understanding it. And that's the purpose. That means that we did our job well. I mean, this is the point. If they've been able to understand something extremely complex that we've been able to break down for them in a visual way, we did our job. But as practitioners, as people actually doing it, we need to figure out how other organizations are actually doing that, how they are making it such a smooth process. So this is what we do a lot. We critique, not like in a bad way, not like saying, oh, this is like bad. No, it's about like looking at the choices that they've made and trying to replicate them. So just having a sort of visual library of what others have done, and understanding the reasons and the purposes behind them makes us, when we're faced with the same issue, because oftentimes it doesn't change that much, then we know what sort of direction to go in. Plus, you know, as a team, we bounce a lot of ideas off of the team. Like we'll go, hey, what do you think about this this version or that version? Which one do you think? And we do a lot of like internal voting, anonymous voting as well, to kind of figure out the best way forward. Yeah.
Great. May I add the second one? It is related to what Tania said on the chat box. Do you have any suggestion how to start learn to code your story? Because maybe more older journalists is not familiar with coding, but younger journalists in Indonesia or maybe in other countries in Southeast Asia is busy to work on their daily bit. So do you have any suggestion how to start?
How to start? Yeah, don't be scared. Don't be scared. Okay. I used to be really scared of coding. And then I did my master's and I realized a lot of it is just being able to search on Google for solutions, going to Stack Overflow, try, break it, try again, break it again, and then it will work. And then you probably don't know why it worked, but it worked. And so you move. That's pretty much like how I've been learning. Look, I studied broadcast journalism and I did all of the data analysis on my own. It wasn't until I did my master's that I have official formal training. But I think that's the beauty of it. So I see a lot in Myanmar as well, the benefits of having open source software, open source coding environments that, you know, they're able to kind of access this and get data out of, even under military coup. They're kind of able to get data out now that they maybe wouldn't be able to before. However, I might pass the mic to one of my colleagues, maybe Steph. Do you have any tips? Because
Evelyn or Rebecca, maybe. Evelyn, Stephanie, maybe.
So I also graduated with a journalism degree and I didn't learn how to code in school either. Actually, it was my internship where I like really learned how to code. And the way I did that was basically it was basically just like jumping into the pool directly. Like I don't know how to explain that, but it was literally like looking at other people's code and like being confused and then trying to figure things out on your own. And I think what's really helpful for me is like looking at other people's code. So for example, like the code that Rebecca has shared, you can try to look at it and like try to manipulate things in the code, because then you'll see like, oh, if I change this, then this changes. If I change this, then this changes. So that's kind of how I learned, is from looking at other people's code and like trying to figure out like how things work structurally. But I mean, but I think, I guess before then you need to have a little bit of like you need to know the basic a little bit. And I would strongly suggest, even if you're not interested in like full on coding, I think knowing HTML and CSS would still be very, very useful as a journalist. Just because like as journalists, you like we're not moving online, and most publications have like a website, and I think it's useful to know like how to put stories on the webpage. I think that's just a useful skill to have, regardless of whether you're doing a data story or not. And so I would say maybe start there, like understanding how HTML and CSS works. Actually, one of the first experiences I had with coding was working at my school, at the international office at my school, and they had a website. So I was in charge of like putting the articles online and blogs and stuff like that. And so I actually learned HTML and CSS from like the CMS that they have, or the interface that you put for the stories, like WordPress and things like that. So you can understand like basic HTML structure from there, like what is a heading, what is a paragraph, and bullets and things like that. So I would say like start small. You don't have to like go from nothing to knowing how to code a Scrolly in like a week. Just anything, like understanding basic things will like pay off in the future. Yeah, just take it slow. I mean, this is, of course, it's like the goal is to learn how to code, but then again, I would stress that if your goal is to produce like a data story, there are other tools out there that doesn't require you to code. So that's, I would say, like if you're on deadline, or if you're wanting to produce something that's kind of quicker turnaround, I would say go to those tools first, rather than trying to figure out how to do this on code and like not being able to do it in the end.
Great. So the best way is try to jump and dive and not to get drowned in the pool of code, right?
Yeah.
Okay, we have more question. The first one, I have question from Treasure Michelle. Do you find investigative stories about the environment? I have do Straits Times do you can we pitch our stories to the Straits Times, or do you have any experience on that?
Okay, I might be the best one to answer that. Yes, by all means, we of course are happy to work on other projects as well. As a team, we are very data visual focused, so convincing us is not the hardest part. Convincing our editors can sometimes be hard. I'm sure, I think there's also might be a question on this in the chat about how to sort of convince perhaps the not so visual data driven areas of the newsroom that this is important and that this is what people want to see. So over time, like I've probably seen it change since 2015 till now, especially with COVID. The demand for data visualization has just like mega increased since then, which is great for us as a team, not great for the world, but great for us as a team. And also, like, okay, there are a few things that we do. One is to keep the intro very visual. So like we have a very clear messaging in the visual, that it's very striking, that it's something that anyone can relate to. We tend to keep our more sciencey data stuff a little bit further down in the piece, which is why that fine line between making sure that we are accurately representing the data and the science in the striking visual at the top, so that we're not distorting anything in any way. But anybody that is perhaps more visually minded or are not visually minded, or more like we are the Straits Times. They have been in existence for 175 years. It's mostly been print. It's still focused on print. That's something that we just have to face. They are very used to dealing with words, but actually seeing something. So one thing that we have to do is prototype, even mock-ups, like literally like visually like mocking it out so they know what we're envisioning, because they won't see it unless we actually show them. Another one is to tie it in with big events. So we had COP26 just recently. That was a great opportunity because we prepared 3 graphics. One of them was the carbon. One of them was the rising seas that we were supposed to publish, but we never did. But anyway, we had 3 big pieces that were prepared for the COP26 for that big climate conference. So that's really helpful if there is a reason for doing these kinds of projects. Another one is to get insight or support from other people in the newsroom. So we had Audrey Tan, who's our climate correspondent, and David Fogati, who's the climate editor. And I emailed them like directly and I chatted with them and I'm like, hey, we have these projects, and like I got them on board as well. So that was like multiple avenues to kind of publish it. But yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily the easiest thing to convince, but of course, if you have any ideas, drop them to us, and be patient. Be patient. These things take time. Yeah, these things take time. It won't be like boom, 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 publish. It may be 6 months down the line, but it will get done and we will get seen. Yeah.
Okay. I think we have 5 minutes left to answer 2 questions. Even our note taker is raising a question. Do you have any example of a project that is based on qualitative data? Because we all know that mostly data-driven project is based on quantitative data.
You know, I don't know if Charlene and stuff have one. We haven't done anything yet. There was this fantastic book that was done in Singapore based on what inequality looks like in Singapore, because it's very subtle. That was a qualitative survey that was done, and we wanted to do something on that. And so it has this really interesting thing that, okay, it's very subtle inequality in Singapore. I'm sure I don't need to go into the details of that, but there are some rental flats in Singapore right next to owned flats, so people that own their property. And from the outside, it looks pretty much the same. There are very few little visual cues that identify those that are rental flats over those that are owned. And so we wanted to go very visual with it. We wanted to actually kind of go into their spaces and show, like, in the inside what it looks like, what inequality really looks like. And even looking at one aspect was looking at where people would travel to. So this is qualitative, but I guess it's geographical data. So if you have less money on average, then you're less likely to travel all around the island. Your area of frequent visiting is like a lot more closed in. Your community is a lot more closed in. Whereas if you're wealthier, then you're able to travel across the island to like see people in other places. So again, like, I think there are avenues for it, but I don't really know. It's a good question. We should think about that more. If you have any ideas of things that you've seen, you know,
maybe
drop
for
it
your
in the
next
chat.
project, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, the last question by Adi Marcella. Could you share the benefit by supporting data-driven story from the management perspective? I know that your example from the Norwegian outlet had been read by almost 2 million readers, if I'm not mistaken. But can you share it from the management perspective?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, beyond it just being like good for fake news, could be one reason. Yeah, definitely. Like since 2015 to now, our page views are just beyond what they used to be. So any project that we do is like, I call them like a low-hanging fruit, that this is obviously content that people want to see. They're always more highly engaged on our pieces. They stay much longer. So the funny thing, I don't know, maybe it's unique to Singapore or the Straits Times thing, but most people will kind of sit in the first 20% of the page, or even less, 10% of the page, which is why I keep that section super packed with like the key angle that I'm trying to show. So if they only see that part and they walk away, fine. I've given them the key part of the information. Anyone that goes past that stays all the way through. They're like super loyal and they'll stay with us all the way through the rest of the piece. So that's when I give the rest of like the Easter eggs, you know, I'm like always like dropping more information for them that they can like feel like they're getting more out of it because they've spent time with us. But yeah, I mean, page views have just gone like crazy right now. If you needed like a reason, like yes, high engagement. Another metric to look at is returning to the page. So we used to have issues with sharing, like you can't track secondary shares. So these kinds of projects tend to be shared amongst people, and then you'll notice the difference, because if people keep coming back to the page after a certain number of weeks, that's another benefit. So these are things that last for a really long time. And then of course the other one, which we tend to like get a lot of help with, is if you win awards. It's kind of nice, so they like that too. It's the cheap aspect of it, but yeah.
Okay, I think that's all, since we only have 1 minute left. But thank you, Rebecca, Stephanie, and Charlene. It's always fascinating with data visualization, and also with the participant. Thank you for everyone. Thank you for seeing this presentation, and don't forget to join the next session. You can visit us at ppmn.org.id to see what session will be the next session. Okay, I think that's all. Again, thanks for Rebecca, Stephanie, and Charlene Sua, and see you later, and keep healthy. Thank
you so much. Bye. Yes, stay safe, everyone.
Okay, great. Thank you to Holikul Alim, Rebecca Pazos, Charlene Chua, and Stephanie Adeline for the eye-opening session today. Who would have thought that data can be so fun, right? Okay, so before we end our session, I would like us to take a quick picture first. You can turn on your camera if you want, and I'll have my colleague from PPMN to take the picture. Mbak Lina, you there?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Again.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, great. So, okay, to the participants, please find the feedback form in the chat box. We highly appreciate it if you can give your feedback about this event, and give a confirmation to us if you need an e-certificate that we will issue for you. And now we are entering the break session for around 24 minutes. But we still have one last session after the break, so don't forget to join in as well via the link in the chat box. See you.
See you. Thank you.